thought around what we're doing is achieving things with people, and it is. And this morning we could have brought any one of, to a sort of 300-400 people who would have a very similar story.
I'm very conscious of the time. The clock is really against us, and we've got a number of questions here that we will be covering. I think your the issue of NICE is very interesting. Perhaps if you can move on to that, Margaret.
Yeah, just talking about NICE and how that you couldn't be approved by NICE as such because you are alternative. Is that the reason? Is it about evidence base? Is it because you haven't built up?
It's a level of time. It's about an evidence base over the period of time. So it's not something that's going to happen for us overnight. The assessment tools that we're using those that are endorsed by the World Health Organization as their guidance for measuring trauma and mental health. And they're endorsed by NICE. So we have our first academic peer-reviewed paper producing in later this month, actually, and for that level of endorsement, it's just a continual process for us in order to be able to gather that level of information and to provide that level of statistics to them.
Certainly in terms of time, periods of time. We've got case studies now 5.5, 6 years. NICE would suggest that they want 15 years worth of empirical data.
That was my next question.
which is, it's just not feasible, really, is it? With the current levels of post-traumatic stress disorder out there.
Just a quick question about you've said in your evidence that you've treated civilians as well as members of the armed forces. To what extent do you think it's necessary to provide a specialist armed forces service rather than one for anybody suffering from PTSD?
I think it's probably best if...
I personally think, my belief is, there's a lot of things that we do in the armed forces, and you'll see in the paper I gave, there's areas under the Official Secrets Act, you can't say things. So therefore it needs to be specific to service personnel, and it needs to be specific to what they've seen and been active in, because I can tell you now, we've all had therapy through people that have never been in the services, and when you say to them, well, I did this, I did that, they'll look at you in shock and they go, oh, that's really bad. Oh, that's really, and you think, well, no, I know that is, I'm here. So don't say it to me, I really do know that. And that's the kind of interaction you get from people that haven't lived the same field we have. We've got a completely different ethos.
Because certainly we're not looking at the stories. The stories to us are irrelevant. They're just a route in to help somebody reframe their own thought process. So somebody who would go in there and start indulging in the story is actually doing the client no good whatsoever. So.
That's very true. From a personal perspective,
a lot of the treatments that I went through before, cognitive therapy, all the psychological analysis and everything else, whatever you like to give the fancy name, I came away feeling worse because I had to explain the terminology. Chair, you said, what does NLP stand for? Well, if I was to give you directions on the barracks and told you to turn left at the RQMSs, and then give you all abbreviations, I would have lost you on the first turn.
Absolutely.
And therefore, if I'm trying to have free-flowing therapy, right, you cannot establish that on the one-to-one basis that you need. And in the words of the therapist that was at the Trauma Health Service, he just does not have the time, the energy, or the money, or the funding that is required to actually get me to a stage where I could open up enough to be able to be helped. The 4-day course was intensive, and to add to that, I'm aware of the medical sort of background to sort of establishing things, but I'm also aware of personal, the personal aspect of it. As a medic in the armed forces, had I been equipped as a medic, because one of our jobs as a medic in the armed forces is to look after the health of the troops. I don't believe it stops when we go out and we sign off from the armed forces. I think it carries on. If we'd have been equipped with the same sort of thing that Talking2minds are doing now, I believe a lot of people would still be alive to this day. A lot of my friends, a lot of people it's hard for me to say that, but that's the truth of it. As for documentation and notes on the background, that is the same reason why I believe the Trauma Health Service, I asked them to do the DRM clinical assessments in the background with the GADs, etc. I have no understanding what that means. If you're a clinician, you will understand it. I asked them to monitor it closely because I believe every case should be documented very, very carefully, independently, of not only Talking to Minds, so that everybody can get work together. Because other things, I'll tell you now, are when I go to, say, a health service in Preston, Lancashire, they'll automatically put any of my conditions down to post-traumatic stress disorder. They're no longer looking at the individual, they're now looking at which is the quickest route of getting treatment and not actually what the problem is originally.
Right.
As somebody who works as a therapist in the arena, then I would support the gentleman in what they said in terms of the ability to build up a level of empathy and rapport with someone and have that permission to work with them is obviously given a lot quicker when you've got a military client. But someone who works as a therapist in the arena, then I've also worked with civilians, with wives, and also the children of PTSD sufferers who believe that the reason why Dad is so angry is their fault. You know, and so as a therapist, I think we can comfortably work multi-spectrum. But I believe that with our clients, it is important to them that the person that they're working with has had some connection. And you know, we have a number of therapists who are wives of of servicemen who've or daughters of, or people who've worked within the MOD. But it's just that not having to continually explain the language.
Okay, the clock has beaten us. I know that you referred in your paper to some work that you're doing with CAIS up in North Wales, a pilot, and we'll put those questions to you in writing, just a little bit more information about that if we can. But there is one final question which I think, Lorraine, you do need to ask, a very important one about the services being developed here in Wales.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's if you are able to take a view on this, but there's an All Wales Veterans Mental Health Service currently being developed using a hub and spoke model with 6 community veteran mental health therapists that'll be based in Cardiff, and then the model, the main part will be based in Cardiff, and 6 community veteran mental health therapists deployed within the other local health boards as we have in Wales. Do you think that arrangement could meet the needs of veterans with mental health needs and also PTSD?
I think it depends on who they were signposting people to. I think is 6 enough? Probably not. But that's just a wet finger in the air. I think it would be who they could support, who they could fund, and who they could signpost people to.
Okay.
Di, you want to quick up?
I'm very impressed with your evidence. I'm also a GP, and I was just wondering, if as this part of this committee review that we're going to end up recommending this form of therapies, we actually need to be spelt out exactly what you do, because as a committee, I don't think we can get away with having a series of recommendations that talks sort of woolly about various therapies that may be alternative, may not be alternative. If we're trying to convince various authorities that what you're advocating should become mainstream, we have to have a clearer handle on what you're actually doing. Is it possible to have a further sort of paper just taking us through exactly how you deal with people? And spelling out the therapies, because if we're going to recommend these therapies with the various titles which are alien to me now as a medical practitioner, it's going to be very strange that, as a conventional medical practitioner, I'm going to start advocating therapies that I know nothing about, using titles NLP that first time I've heard about it is today. Okay. So you're asking a lot for this committee then to come down and say, right, we're going to go completely down that track when we don't actually have a firm handle on what you're on about.
I think probably the easiest, we can put something in writing, but I think the easiest thing to do is to invite you onto one of the change programmes and to come and spend a day, and for any member of the committee to come and spend a day. And actually, a document can only give us so much information, but I think to actually come and see what happens and see, and just get a feel for, more importantly, how it all works, I think would be far better, and it would then bring the words to life.
Yeah. The clerk will work with you to see if we can arrange for a delegation from the committee's visit. One very final question. In terms of your funding, how are you funded at the moment, given that you're not branded as mainstream?
Gentlemen like these funding us.
So it's literally individual fundraising, donations.
Post course, some of the guys go away and literally start fundraising for us to get other chaps through the programme.
Yeah, I canoed 750 kilometres down the Yukon River in an endurance race in May, which was very traumatic, in order to raise money, and it's other events like that.
What does it cost to put one person through your programme?
Less than £2,000, and that includes the palliative care side of things as well, so that we can keep reintroducing them into the programme should they need a little bit of extra work around something else, another, let's say, problem area in their life that presents at a later stage.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your time, gentlemen. We've really appreciated hearing about your therapies. Thank you. We'll take